What's up, heathens? How ya doing? Today, we're gonna be going over the rest of this video that I posted last week. So, I hope that you're prepared for stupid shit like this.
3. The Gospels are accurate. How do we know the Gospels are accurate? The Bible contains scientifically advanced statements for its time. Archaeology. Archaeological findings support that the biblical records are accurate.
Ah yes, bad reasons to trust Christianity and Jesus' historicity, all in one list. So, if you're interested in any of this dumb shit, then please stay tuned.
The Gospels are accurate. How do we know the Gospels are accurate? A. At a time when followers of Christ were being killed, would the disciples decide one day to make up a figure and pretend Jesus fulfilled all those prophecies? Would people die for something they knew was a lie?
I hate the die for a lie fucking thing because that's so disingenuous to say. Because obviously people can die for a lie. I mean, if they're all in on it and they really want people to believe it, of course they would die for a lie. There are plenty of people that die for lies now. So don't give me that shit about they won't die for a lie. Of course they would die for a lie. But also that assumes that anything in the New Testament was written by these firsthand witnesses, by the disciples themselves, which it wasn't. Because the Mark wasn't written until 70. The only original author that you really have in the Bible was Paul, and he was writing in the 50s. So don't give me this shit about how the disciples sitting there at the table fawning over goddamn Jesus dick, it actually sat down and wrote some shit out.
B. At a time when followers of Christ were being killed, would people continue to mass-produce manuscripts about a resurrected Jesus, knowing that believing in such would cost them their lives?
Well, yes, because martyrdom is a key aspect to Christianity. I mean, Jesus was martyred himself. I mean, he is the poster boy for martyrdom. Of course, they were fine with dying for Jesus because it was taught to them, well, Jesus died for you. You gonna die for Jesus? I mean, that was told to me so many times in Christianity when I was being like, when I was at church. Like, you know, they put such a heavy emphasis on the fact that Jesus died for me. It's like, well, you give your life for him. Well, fuck, I don't know that guy. Goddamn. Of course, as a Christian, I was like, yeah, sure, I'll give my life for Jesus. But, you know, I was young and dumb. You never said that as a Catholic. But yeah, martyrdom is a big thing in Christianity. I would totally expect people that already wholeheartedly believe in Jesus to die for that belief. I think that there probably were some Christians that defected under the threat of death. But regardless of that point, that doesn't mean that others couldn't have.
C. At the time, there were enough witnesses to see Jesus die, and also to see Jesus resurrect. Thus, in the process and reproducing of manuscripts, if Jesus didn't resurrect, would not someone have edited it to show what actually happened?
Interesting, because Mark was indeed edited. Mark was edited to add an extra like 12 lines at the end of it that had post-resurrection stuff. So generally in historical like sources and stuff like that, you go with the earliest redaction of it or the earliest version of a particular source, because that's going to be the one that's closest to the an accurate depiction of what happened. Things that are edited afterwards are almost never closer to the actual events because they're farther removed from the events that happened. So this particular line of logic that he's providing here is actually fucky. Don't be fucky in your logic. Don't listen to this guy.
That Jesus really probably didn't resurrect? Same as 9/11. If someone wrote something wrong, it would easily be edited out before further production. But there are a lot of manuscripts.
Well, like I said, I mean, we have several, like, for instance, if you have a source that's early, but it contradicts all of the other corroborating evidence, obviously you're not going to trust that source. So to say that like, oh, well, you know, they added later that he didn't resurrect, that wouldn't have happened because resurrection was a key thing in dying and rising gods. He had to resurrect in order for him to be a dying and rising god and atone for sins. So it doesn't make any sense to play this whataboutism game.
D. Even though a variety of people have recorded different aspects of an event, it doesn't nullify that the events didn't happen. Just because people have different accounts of what happened to them during 9/11 doesn't mean 9/11 didn't occur.
While I would agree with this sentiment here, I do have to fundamentally disagree with how different the Gospels are. They are so very different in their in what they recall that I would say that it would be impossible to know which one is correct.
Just because people have different accounts of what happened when Jesus lived, died, and resurrected doesn't mean they didn't occur.
Well, again, I understand like your point here, but they're so different that you have to question the reliability of all of them because they're so different.
Remember, the commonality among multitudes of accounts verify that the details of a certain event is real.
I would agree if they were independent. He is not allowing for the non-independence of the Gospels. He considers them all to be independent. But see, the point that he's missing here is that Matthew, Luke, and most parts of John are based on Mark. So they're not independent at all.
If the disciples made up the Gospels, they could have easily used more popular names such as Peter, Mary, or Andrew. But instead, they chose a tax collector and a fisherman.
Okay, I don't understand what that little bit of whataboutism is actually doing. I don't understand how that proves it to be true or not. Oh, they could have used different names if they wanted to use different names. Well, of course they could. I want to say at least some of the Gospels actually don't say that like who they were written by. It's later people that ascribe names to them. So it wasn't the disciples that wrote the Gospels.
While the manuscripts in our history books, such as the Gallic Wars, Pliny's Natural History, Plato, Tacitus's Annals, are all based on only 7 to 20 manuscripts, and the earliest we find are dated 1,000 years after the event's occurrence, the Bible's events are based on 50,000 plus manuscripts, and the earliest dating is only 50 years after the events of the Gospels. The book.
Hiya, heathens! This is GE from the future, from when this video was recorded, but, I felt like I didn't really elaborate on this point very well. So, that's why I'm cutting in here to give you a bit more information. For one thing, this guy in this video is trying to say that there are several hundreds of thousands of copies that the New Testament is based on or that support the New Testament. But what he's actually regurgitating here is the common lie that the New Testament gospel has all of these different copies of it, so therefore it's implicitly true because it was copied so many times. That's what he's trying to impart on us here, and it's really just a bad apologist line to try to convince you that the Bible is true just because people copied it. But even then, all of these different copies that we have show how each individual person that was copying it inserted their own ideas into the scripture. There are so many thousands of textual interpolations in these extant copies of all of these manuscripts. So really, the only thing that all of these things show is that Christianity was popular, it was part of the mainstream, and also people wanted to change the message of it to suit their own needs. That's what all this proves. But he's trying to pass this off as it being well supported, well documented, or anything like that, to give it an air of legitimacy, when it really isn't.
The Book of John is found in Egypt. The earliest manuscript we have is 125 AD.
Well, for John, yeah, and then we know we assume that like Mark had to have been written after 70 AD because it chronicles the destruction of the Jewish temple. And then since Matthew and Luke use Mark, they had to have been written after that. So that's like 80s, 90s, something like that. John is given an approximate date between 90 and 125. So yeah, I mean, he's very shoddy on his actual history in these documents.
Okay, number 4. The Bible contains scientifically advanced statements for its time.
No, it didn't. You can read scientific statements into the Bible if you want to, but that is literally not what they were talking about when they wrote this shit.
For example, in 700 BC, it was already written that the earth is round. By the way, in Hebrew, the word circle came from a word that means spherical.
No, it doesn't. I actually looked this up. If you go to the Septuagint version of Isaiah 40:22 and you look at that particular line that has circle in it, you will see that the circle is actually more about encompassing or circling around something. It always mentions a two-dimensional plane being encircled. So no, it didn't mean sphere. It never meant sphere at all.
The word sphere didn't exist in 1612. B. In 2000 BC, it was already written that the earth hangs on nothing and sits on nothing.
That's not indicative of God imparting that information. For one thing, humans naturally coming to this, which we did prior to when Job was written, humans coming to that conclusion is far more likely than the supernatural explanation of God handing this information down to humans. So the mundane explanation of humans just figuring shit out is way more likely, which they did prior to when this was written. And the Old Testament existed in a time when like the whole spherical model and whatnot was overtaking the more flat Earth model. That's why you have so many verses in the Old Testament that seem to support a flat Earth kind of thing, because it was kind of in flux when it was being written.
While some people believed Atlas or an elephant carried the earth. C. In 600 BC, Jeremiah already wrote that the stars are innumerable. Ancient scientists such as Hipparchus and Kepler thought that the stars could not be numbered. Not until a telescope was invented was the Bible proven correct.
I don't see how the telescope proves that the stars are innumerable. I mean, we've been able to estimate how much matter is in the universe. We've been able to estimate how many stars there are in existence. So while we don't have an exact number, that doesn't mean that they're innumerable. We know how many stars are probably out there.
D. In 2000 BC, someone had already recorded there are underwater springs. How would anybody have known that?
You showed ocean currents, and like those are ocean currents. Why do you think those are like underwater springs? Do you not know what an underwater spring? Underwater spring would be like fucking Yosemite. What's that geyser in Yosemite? Old Faithful. Old Faithful would be what you would think about. But no, he gives us fucking ocean currents as like springs.
C. Around 935 BC, King Solomon recorded that the winds travel in circular motion. How would he have known that without meteorologists' analysis on TV?
You seriously don't think that people figured out at least a little bit of weather without satellites? Just being able to look up into the air or seeing like a little dust swirl or whatever the fuck in the desert and seeing that it moves in a circular fashion? You don't think they could have just peeled their fucking eyes open at some point and been like, oh look, it's going in a circular fucking motion. This must be God breed.
F. In around 1405, Joshua records destroying a thick wall through a scientific property called resonance. How did Joshua or the writer know that constant resonance, the same resonance that Paul Linings discovered in 1928 that collapses a bridge, would cause a thick city wall to come down? And not only that, how would Joshua or the writer know that sound oscillations are so powerful enough that it can cause massive destruction, just like subwoofers?
Okay, so that is not what was in Joshua at all. This is what I'm talking about when I say that he's reading into shit. He's reading into this kind of stuff, like, the resonance frequency. Like, that's not what God said. God didn't say, yo, Joshua, I've been looking at my fucking calculations here, okay? And what you have to do is you have to get 745 men to scream like crazy madmen at a wall. And they gotta scream at the exact right pitches for each of these groups that I'm about to lay out to you, just so that they can shatter that fucking wall, okay? For one thing, it didn't happen, okay? That's not history. There's nothing to indicate that he shattered the fucking wall with the resonance frequency of stone. Okay, one thing, that's not what God said to Joshua, but also they didn't know about resonance frequencies. I mean, if they knew about resonance frequencies, why didn't they just, like in the next town, they went to IE, which is a lot like Fonzie. Hey, why didn't they just march a whole bunch of fucks out there and scream at them and like make their heads explode or something with resonance frequencies? You would think that if Joshua, being a warrior, had the military capability of producing a resonance frequency that would crack a wall wall or cause a wall to crumble. He would use that exact same technology to fucking blow the minds, quite literally, of his enemies.
So, do you really think humans back then made up these scientific facts?
I don't think they made up scientific facts. I think they used their fucking eyes and their senses in order to determine that that is the way reality works.
Then if you look at other books, let's say the Quran, it reveals some unscientific facts, such as in Surah 1886, it says that this person traveled far enough to where the sun goes and into the earth, and the sun goes into a muddy spring. That's not scientifically accurate.
Well, no, it's not, but the Bible's not scientifically accurate either.
Number 5.
I mean, in the Bible, it has Jesus like chasing demons out of pigs and spitting and rubbing dirt in the eyes of a blind man to cure blindness. Don't give me this shit about how it's fucking scientific.
Archaeology.
Archaeology does not prove anything in the Bible.
Archaeological findings support that the biblical records are accurate. Many critics try to belittle the Bible by saying, oh, where's Babylon? Where's Nineveh? Where are those external writings about the all-famous King David? Or Jesus Christ? Or anybody ever said Jesus Christ is God outside of the Bible? If the Bible is so real, why don't extra biblical references exist? Well, we have unearthed Babylon. We have unearthed Nineveh. In 1995, the stone with King David's inscription was discovered, and that even Time magazine wrote about it.
Time magazine wrote about it, so therefore Moses definitely got God to write the 10 Commandments with his lightning dick. Obviously.
December 2005, a church was unearthed in Megiddo that had on it described a dedication which says, a Keptis, the devout, dedicated the table of God, Jesus Christ, as a memorial, which you can find more information about on foxnews.com.
Okay, so he's playing a little bit loose with these archaeological finds. Just because a certain city or even two cities existed does not mean that the accounts in the Bible actually are historical. We know now that like the conquest of the Canaanites that Joshua led, those didn't actually happen. The Jews were actually Canaanites that just outperformed the other Canaanites. They just worked into their theology about how Joshua, this great warrior, conquered the Canaanites. Yeah, you know, we know that that didn't happen. And just because they unearthed a church that, you know, proclaims Jesus or whatnot, it would have occurred after like the rumors of Jesus or the theology surrounding Jesus would have been circulating, at least enough for them to actually build a church. So you have to understand that you got to take a critical look at these archaeological finds. Just because like they found a stone tablet or something like that had Jesus' name written on it doesn't mean that Jesus was actually historical.
And also, a famous archaeologist, Dr. Nelson Glueck, he said, it may be stated categorically that no archaeological discovery has ever controverted a biblical reference. Scores of archaeological findings have made it which confirm in clear outline or in exact detail. Proper evaluation led to amazing discoveries.
I sincerely doubt that this guy is unbiased because there are obvious archaeological discoveries that contradict what's in the Bible. We know this for certain. So what this guy's saying is obvious bullshit and makes me think that he is a Christian and he only looks at things that validate his own worldview. Oh man, the chariot wheels and armor and skeleton from Exodus found. I mean, these are just structures that resemble them. I mean, pareidolia, motherfucker, learn it.
See, the Bible's accuracy is so well trusted by many archaeologists that it even has been used as a map to make many more discoveries.
Actually, there have been people that have spent 10, 20 years of their lives trying to validate shit that's in the Bible, and they come up with nothing. So don't tell me how they use the Bible in order to make predictions about where shit was. The Bible had no concept of geography whatsoever because the Bible is a theological book. It's not like a history book or a fucking map.
Okay, so in conclusion, what other book, religious book, mythology book, contains all these attributes? See, this is why the Bible is not just a book or collection of books. It was written and inspired by a higher being.
No, it wasn't. That is the least probable of all possible explanations.
Like all things, there is a purpose. While all religions tell you to earn your righteousness with a checklist of do's and don'ts, the Bible teaches that you can never complete the checklist to solve your problem of sin. Thus, a Savior had to come down to save us. The Old Testament testifies of man's wickedness. The New Testament testifies of a risen Savior and a forgiving God.
Of course, because that's the theology that they wanted the New Testament to put forth. I mean, that doesn't actually prove that God exists or that God is those things or that Jesus even resurrected. Thank you, heathens, for making it to the end. Hey, if you haven't left a comment down below with what you thought about these dumbass reasons to trust Christianity, then please leave your comments down below. While you're down there, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe if you like this kind of content. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice, and I will see you heathens later.